Hello everyone! Today we are going to talk about wedding stationery, the complete suite of wedding stationery, including the on-the-day stationery, and on top of that we are going to address everything that has to do with it. There is a lot of things to be said about etiquette and also some sensitive points that have to do with wedding family politics that need to be addressed. So let's get right into it, and please don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell and give us a thumbs up if you like what we share here today. And why do I say we? Because I thought for this important subject I need to talk to a pro, and the pro is Cara Green from the Little Papershop in the UK, which is a graphics and printing studio, and she has quite some experience in this field and will be sharing this experience with us and show us some of her work. So let's get right into it. So hi Cara, good evening and glad that you could make it. So as announced, we want to talk about all the wedding stationery that is out there and the possibilities that we have, because of course there are different budgets and different tastes. And what I find very interesting, and I hope our viewers too, is that we are a bit, having a challenge. On one side, what do we do the analog traditional way, and what do we do in the modern way? Like, for example, when it comes to our online possibilities, and what shall we use without losing our elegant style? Because I mean, let's be honest, it's an occasion that is quite special, and for most out of there, probably their first printing contract that they will bring out. And the other thing that I wanted to tackle was maybe post-corona, what are the challenges budget-wise and what has changed maybe?
Okay, so yeah, I can definitely talk about the impact that we're seeing from Corona and the pandemic when it comes to wedding stationery in the UK. The big thing for UK weddings has been over the last year, they've barely been able to go ahead. It's one of the big restrictions that we have seen with social distancing measures, in that gathering a group of people of that size has just been a no-go. So loads of postponements and things have been happening, and we are only just starting to reopen and are expecting our first few weddings coming through really. Odd ones have been sneaking through, but on the whole they're just about to start up again, and we are in May 2021 for the purposes of those watching this video in future. The opening of the weddings isn't going straight from 0 to normal sized wedding parties, so we are limited in numbers. And of course the impact there when it comes to stationery is it can be quite difficult to get those traditional printed processes and suites that you normally would like when you are dealing with such small print runs effectively. So if there is only a wedding of up to 30 guests allowed to happen, including bride and groom, so on, that equates down to households that are looking at sort of 10-15 invitations, and it's actually really difficult from a printing perspective to do that in a very cost effective way. So I think what you were mentioning before about analog versus digital, that has increased definitely, I think, those couples considering whether digital options are better under those circumstances. On the flip side, one thing we are seeing is that when you are having those smaller, more intimate weddings, by choice or not, that actually our couples might be spending more money per guest when it comes to their on-the-day stationery, because there's more budget there suddenly freed up to really treat their guests with very special favours, or really kind of styling up those intimate one banquet table rather than the big room with lots of tables. So that is somewhere where it is interesting. We're actually seeing maybe more money being spent on stationery, but we are hoping and expecting and all working towards, in the next, I'd say, I think it's about 6 to 8 weeks, that actually weddings should be lifted and allowed to go ahead completely as normal. As it stands, touching lots of wood here in the UK, and so we will get back to those more common guest numbers, I think, of kind of between the 80 to 120, which is what you tend to see at an average UK wedding. I don't know, from your side, Joanne, what's your kind of guest numbers over in the continent?
Oh, that depends a lot on many factors. I think that normally, I mean, if there's an average, I would say it's about 80-90 guests, but that would already be big. I mean, that's quite big already. Then, of course, if you're in certain exposed social situations, or if you get married late in life, and it's more and more so, and you have established a career, then you have obviously also already been invited to many weddings, and you normally should, how do you say that, replicate this favor. And So that what's happened to us, we would have loved to have had a wedding just with 80, 90 people, because of course you can then talk to everybody or almost everybody. And the bigger it gets, and we had around, in the end, of course, more invitations sent out, but we were about, if I remember well, 126, something like that.
Okay.
And that's quite big.
I was going to say, the bigger side probably here in the UK,
Yeah, and that's also big for the continent. So, but that's everybody has to see what their taste is. I mean, for me, it was like that my birthday, my 50th birthday, was 1 week later. So I considered it also a bit like my 50 years birthday party. But everybody has to see what they can afford, obviously. And it's, I know it's quite difficult to make the decisions whom to invite and especially whom not to invite. That can be quite sensitive, and one wants to think about that quite carefully. And I would want to address one point, because I know it's very sensitive nowadays, but it can help all the couples save some money, but they probably realize that it's sensitive, and many people try to push that question away. And for us, it was like that because we were older, and obviously our friends, in the meantime, they all have children. Okay. And most of them have many children. I have quite some couples on my friend's side, and also my husband's side. They have 3 or 4 children per couple. So then the number of children per couple exceeds the number of adults. And if you have that for many couples, as we had, then that would mean that your marriage might turn, or your wedding party might turn into a children's birthday party.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have an outside wedding, don't get me wrong, and it's going to be nice weather, and the children can run around and they have fun and they will take care of themselves and they will play, then of course that doesn't play a big role. But if you are in a very elegant venue like we were, a palace, a castle, or even a ballroom setting, then this can become quite tricky, and it becomes quite expensive, because even if you order a children's menu and you give all the children spaghetti, these are going to be the most expensive spaghettis that you have ever paid for.
Which won't be appreciated by a 5-year-old.
Yeah, but then, and also I think there's also a legal side to it. I'm thinking about especially the US with all the legal side attached to it. I mean, obviously, if you want your friends, the adults, to party with you, then somebody has to take care of these kids. And what if something happens, God forbid? Yeah, who is liable? These are questions that need to be raised. And also, even if you have somebody taking care of the children, then the parents will at one point think, okay, my kid has to go to bed, I have to leave. And that's not going to be at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's going to be at 10, 11-ish. Yeah. So then you have invited everybody, and then they have to leave because their kids are there. So give this a thought. And towards the end of the video, I will also give a hint how to formulate that in a nice way, that maybe the children are not invited to the reception. They might be invited to church, to the wedding, they see the bride, and that's nice. And if there is enough time in between, or if you're staying at a hotel, then you can have the children put somewhere, and then the reception is really the party. And what I have experienced is, of course, you have some discussions going on with some parents, but I would say stick to your idea. If you have good reasons to do so, then those reasons will be valid. Don't make exceptions, because if you make exceptions, that's just terrible.
Not offense for us.
Then you have discussions on the day of your wedding, and that's what you don't need at all. And I had many parents who were thankful, because they said, well, finally, we got to be there as a couple, and we had quality time for us, and that happens so seldomly. And so there are 2 sides to that, and it has nothing to do whether you like children or not. You can love children to death, especially if you love children. Mm-hmm. Then respect that some settings are not made for children. They are not adequate. Well, if you have this countryside wedding, then of course, then that's not a question you have to ask yourself. But in a castle and in a very elegant setting, it's tricky. It's tricky.
And we see that. And actually, the way we work with our couples is we provide, they gain access to a private area where they can kind of go through the design process with us. But actually, we also use that area to guide them with ways of wording these common dilemmas, common etiquette with the way that you would word your invites. And again, supporting the couples through that, because we were having a chat slightly earlier, weren't we, Joanna? And actually, quite often, as I think you mentioned, it's the first time you're kind of commissioning this sort of stuff quite often. wedding. So couples need to be guided. And with children, like you say, it's nothing to do with preference in terms of whether you enjoy children or not. It's actually down to practicalities of how easy it is to have them attend, even down to the timings. You know, weddings here in the UK certainly go on until the early hours, normally around 12, midnight, 12:30.
We partied until 5:30. Come on.
I know. I was very lucky to attend a French wedding a couple of years ago, and I think it was still going at 5, and they were very disappointed that in the UK we're wrapping up at about 12. It's normally dictated by licenses at venues rather than the guests. I will put that out there in favour of the Brits. But yeah, so it's all about how you kind of educate and let your guests know. And the overwhelming majority and experience of us is that, like you said, the mums and dads actually enjoyed the opportunity to have a night off. And
yeah, they were so thankful.
Peace, let's face
it. But you made me curious, because you said, aside the children question, you said dilemmas in plural. What is the other dilemma that they are facing?
So often it's to do with gift wording. The classic traditional way was a gift list to set up a couple. They were starting their married lives together. They were starting their home lives together. And of course, that's quite an outdated approach nowadays. Most couples, when they all, I'm saying most, obviously it differs, but let's look at the majority. When they're getting married, they've probably lived together by that point. They've probably got all the pots and pans and beautiful cutlery and things.
Or in double, even, if they all had...
Actually, you'd have to have a pretty good bachelor. I don't think what my husband brought into the mix when we first moved in together. I don't think it was much. But they don't need the classic traditional gift list necessarily. So often what's more supportive of couples nowadays, and you know, my husband and I did this, was actually trying to set them up on their married life together to maybe buying a house or going on a honeymoon of their dreams. So it's become more and more common to, in a polite way, ask for a monetary gift or a donation. I say a donation, a gift towards their honeymoon. But how do you say that in a way that doesn't feel not quite right? So we have different wording examples of that. And actually the styling of the wording of the invite. So classically in the UK, the wording of the invitation comes from the bride's parents, because they used to be the hosts of the wedding. They would plan the wedding. You as the bride would almost attend as much of a guest as your guest would. And of course, that is very much not the trend anymore. Mums are usually quite heavily involved, so rightly so. But actually the bride is planning her wedding. So there are different ways of wording it, and more families and couples get involved with contributing monetary values to the wedding as well, and therefore modern day invitations should reflect that. It's not necessarily appropriate to have it from the bride's parents anymore. So we give different ways of wording the actual invitation itself, and also there is a difference between the classic style, the traditional style, where the date is written out in full in words. So if you were to invite someone to a wedding that is in August 2022, you would write 2022.
Yeah, it used to be like that.
Numerical. So again, we're giving all this information to our couples and prompting them to have a think and have discussions. But we will always, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this, Joanna, encourage a couple to do what feels natural to them. Be themselves. We as a station will help you work through that to find the most sort of practical way of creating stationery that reflects you and your values as a couple. But it will be very obvious to your guests, your family and your loved ones if you're sending something that isn't very you as a couple. If you're a very relaxed avant-garde couple and you've suddenly gone all formal on your invites, it's going to be weird. So
but that's what I as a, let's say, neutral person in here, I mean, of course I have chosen you as the expert because I know that your work is really refined, and you're always also, you know, giving this additional advice and trying to understand who is your customer. It's like, I mean, we are working together on the business side of things, but it's kind of the same, you know. A couple is kind of a small brand, and they have a personality, and so it goes, you know, it's and that I would recommend to anybody, wherever you're in the world, look for somebody who tries to understand who you are, what your personalities are, who you are as a couple, what is your family situation, what is your age. It matters a lot, especially what you're saying. I mean, imagine I was 49, my husband was 56 when we were getting married. So obviously you don't put your parents as the ones who invite.
It would have been appropriate under those circumstances, yeah.
We also had another dilemma that depends on the countries. So for example, my husband, he's in medicine, so he's an MD, and then you have the academic titles. So then the question was, you know, in aristocracy, it's no question you're going to put your title. That's for sure. You don't need to discuss because that's part of your name. Now here in Germany, for example, a doctor it's abbreviated in D, capital D, small r, and a dot. That is legally part of your name.
Yeah, same.
Whereas professor is not legally part of your name. And then we were like thinking, well, what will we put down? And then my husband, it's up to him to decide, because we're not talking my titles, we're talking his titles. So the question was, what would we use? And then he said, you know what, my titles, they don't have anything to do with this private event, because I'm not getting married to you as an MD. I'm getting married to you as the man I am. So he decided to take away the titles, to strip himself of the title, a subject that is currently being discussed in the UK for somebody else. But he stripped himself of the titles for the invite. But what of course he then needed to do, and then again you have to think about your guests, is when you then do the tables and you put down who's at the table, what you call it, the table seating.
Table plan, okay, table plan, seating plan is known as.
The table plan, yeah, Tischplan, that's what we also have, or the Sitzordnung in German. And there my husband said, well, I need to put my title and also the title of everybody else, because otherwise, you know, I am not the one to decide for them, but then it would be weird if I would not put mine. So think about, there are little details you don't think about before you have to deal with them, but they are very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
Very, very sensitive, and people can take it weirdly. Even my mother-in-law, she didn't understand why my husband decided not to put his title, but you see, that's another generation. So and it's maybe good to discuss matters with the family and also explain why you do things a certain way. Just to have, we say it in German that we say everybody's in the boat, you know, so everybody knows where you're coming from.
Yeah. Everyone understands what's happening, and
yes.
Something we see commonly here, it's kind of like wedding politics, we call it. You've got to kind of navigate those politics because there's so many people involved. It's a highly emotional day. It's a big and momentous day, and there's often a lot of money being spent at it from different parties, and they therefore have opinions. So it is hard for the couples to navigate.
And this is why I wanted to talk about this a bit more elaborately, because even if out there there should be some very avant-garde and very modern independent couples, and of course this is your brand, this is what you stand for, and this is what you're going to convey with your invitation and your wedding concept probably, and your venue and the dress and everything that goes with it. But don't forget that the wedding in itself, no matter how avant-garde and how modern you are as a couple, a wedding is a traditional event per se. And it is a family event per se. So even if you know what you are and what you like and what you want, you have to give a certain consideration to this event in itself, what kind of an event it is, and so that you don't harm the feelings of somebody for something that is maybe not so important or where you can compromise upon. And I think this is, just give it a thought and ask yourself the question, is it so important, or is it very important to somebody else? I'm talking about, can be also cultural and religious things that play a role. And I think it's not worth hurting the feelings of somebody who might think that certain things are important. And so maybe we can go into the different kind of invitations, because first what are the first questions that you ask your customers when it comes maybe to the color palette, and after understanding who they are, the concept, the color palette, how do you go about it?
Yeah, so what we try and find out first and foremost really is if there any design aesthetics to the day. So a colour palette's a really obvious one, and they will usually have a colour palette. So that starts to give us a sense of what colours we might be considering for the palette within the stationery as well. Also considerations of what they're planning for the day. So if we start to hear that there are huge elaborate centerpieces planned for the tables with really high flowers, and they're, again, like we keep using this bit of avant-garde, but maybe they're getting a little bit crazy and out there with the props, then that starts to inform what we need to think about. I'm often privy to the bride's planning boards on Pinterest and thing, which is really quite useful, because you instantly get a mood board in front of you as a designer and know exactly what that look is for that bride, that couple.
I would really want to point that out. I think Pinterest is a great place to work with, to get inspiration, to see what is out there left and right. Even if you seem to know pretty much what you want,
yeah,
doesn't hurt to look left and right and to see what other people did. I think, and it makes your work as a graphic designer easier, right?
Yeah, because I can see something and instantly I might see a common theme with the fonts that they're kind of picking on, because they're drawn to it. They might not understand why they're drawn to it, but they're drawn to it for a reason. It's going on the board. So it starts to inform what we can show and what we decide. We also will discuss design. So are we going for a templated design? And that's normally when couples are being a bit more budget conscious, where they can choose from a selection that we've already pre-designed. They can still customize. It's really important for us, for our studio, that you have a high level of customization, because as already mentioned, we think it's really important that the stationery should reflect the couples as individuals. So it's really important to us that you can still choose things like your card stocks, your paper textures, and the colors and so on there. So even if you're going for a template design, which is a bit more budget friendly, you're still tweaking it, and we've set it up to be easy for the studio team to do that. Of course, the other alternative, and definitely one of our favorites and that we're kind of renowned for, is full-on creative brief. Let's start from scratch, let's get drawing, let's get designing, and we will really go to town on being very clever with the designs. And that is when we're really getting into all the details and reflecting you guys as a couple. I've actually got a great example I could share of on screen. Yeah. So what we have here is a very individual design that we did a few years ago. So actually the printing process on this are pretty nice. They're kind of less pressed than the hot foiling, but as you can see, it's a very modern interpretation. The colours are quite individual, so it's quite an unusual colour palette for weddings, so it was good fun to work with. But what I loved about this couple is it reflected them. So the bride in question, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this, is, or was at the time, an English teacher. So she had a real love for literature, and she really wanted to incorporate that within the styling on the day. The groom was not as much of a fan of her idea to have all the classic literature novels as centerpieces on the table. He was very against it. So we as a studio came up with this concept, which was A Tale of Two Cities, which of course Dickens. So that fed into her love of literature and reflected the bride, but it also fed into their story. If I can remember correctly, they met in London during teacher training and things, and actually got proposed, he proposed her in New York. So that became the whole theme throughout and went all the way through to the actual on the day styling. We also were privileged in that they were really embraced kind of, you can see there some hot foiling, really embraced the printing processes that just maximised it. So as well as having the luxury of their own bespoke designs that they weren't going to see anywhere else that really reflected them as a couple, they also invested in some really good processes.
But maybe we can dig into the printing techniques at this point, because I think, as you said, many people have never commissioned any order like that, and they don't even know what's out there and what it means budget-wise. So maybe let's first start with the supporting material, which is obviously the paper. So let's maybe rank it from the, between brackets, cheapest to the most exclusive and most expensive papers. What is out there? What would cost more or less what, or what is in percentage to each other? Where do we stand?
So, I mean, of course, it depends on the studio, but if I use what we would work with, so if we're looking at the lower, more budget conscious end, then we are going to be looking at thick cardstock still, but that can be digitally printed on. So that means we can place an order, have all your designs digitally printed, but it is ink effectively going onto flat paper underneath.
Yeah, okay, then maybe we can already go into also the printing techniques and link it, because digital printing obviously is the most inexpensive way to print. And it goes also very fast. That's also a timing thing. Maybe we can also address that. When should ideally, because we have to think, when should ideally the invitations be sent out, especially if you have an international invitation or guest list. And also how much time would you need to do the design and then the printing process depending on the printing technique?
Yeah, and again, very open-ended. So perhaps I'll talk about that as we're going through the kind of tiered approach. So digital printing is definitely going to be quickest. Actually, when it goes to order, we can usually have it back at the studio in a couple of days and packed up and ready to go to you. So that would be the absolute quickest one to get out, and therefore that's why it's one of the most budget friendly. It's got far less work involved into it. If we are adding a bespoke design on top of that, and for me, if you are conscious of budget and want something still special, that would be my recommendation. Invest in a bespoke design service, but then tailor it back on the printing processes potentially, because you're still going to get some very unique and wow that is based on you guys. But then when it comes to the actual printing, it's not going to be as costly. And again, I can show you a little example close up. This was a full bespoke design. So we drew all these out from scratch. It was all based on the bride's bouquet and flowers. But you can still see there's a nice texture there to the card. It's still what we call heavyweight. It's 300 GSM, so it's not going to feel flimsy. We don't want that. It's never an option for us to have flimsy, but it's not the most expensive, and that's because it can run through printing processes. There's another example here. You can really see the sense of the texture of the card there. So this is a whole suite that was done. It does have some embellishments on which we'll put across, but at the heart of it, it's all digitally printed, and it's a bespoke design. So lots of illustration work. So you're paying for that additional service up front, but you're getting something that's very unique that might not actually need all those bells and whistles added to it potentially. So I would definitely say that's kind of your tier one approach.
Maybe you can go back one moment just
Yeah.
so that we can base ourselves on certain elements there.
Yeah.
I loved the one with the flowers, which reflected the flowers of the bouquet. But there I also see this silver thread in the upper left corner. Was that something that was kind of like a belly band around the card, or what was that?
So what I could show you is a little close up. So although they went for the printing processes that were maybe more cost effective, we did that for a reason. So they've come in, we've sat down, we've planned a bespoke design for them. So we've used their budget cleverly, knowing what we know in our experience. Again, okay, this is the look you want, so let's direct the larger portions of budget in these areas. What are the deal breakers? What are the absolute I must haves? And one for them was wax seals, bespoke design, and also what we call a vellum wrap. So that's a slightly transparent wrapping that you put around it.
Lovely.
That's where the silver thread came in.
Cara, one question, because I know from your fine shop that there are those original wax seals that are really wax and it's stripped upon, and then you probably need the stamp with the monogram. We're gonna talk monograms in a second as well. Yeah. And then you have in your shop, as I understand, ready-made seals that you can stick on. What is the difference? What is the cost difference?
Oh, it's quite significant. So with these, there's obviously a cost, and actually when we do bespoke wax seals for our customers, we include the cost of designing a monogram with that. So if a couple are coming to us and they're not buying one that we just store inside, we're going to be designing something that goes with their suite. However, you can get sort of designs that fit in with a large majority, and that can be a nice cost-effective way of getting your wax seals on, but without going to that bespoke level of investment. You know, and there's again a nice example here. This is used on a menu. This is an olive leaf, an olive branch. So these kind of things we have in stock, and actually that's still hand stamped. So even if we're buying in from kind of our suppliers, or like you say, we do it ourselves in house, someone is stamping those ready, but we do it on mats and stuff that allow them to cool down, and then we actually almost affix a double-sided sticker on the back. So you get a very different look. So again, referring back to the one we're looking at, although they had a bespoke design, that was that effect where it's been hand stamped really quickly and well and cleanly, and then it's applied as a sticker. Whereas if I was to open up this one, very unusual design, this one, it's for a styled shoot that was World War II themed, hence all the telegram style. But you can see here, this is stamped on. It's gone around the actual thread there. It's sunk around it. It's done what molten wax does, and that's part of the beauty of it. So they're considerations. Going back to that one we had before here, that is a really good example, because you can see down here there's a little tab at the back. So they're stamped by hand to get that kind of organic look, but they're cooled down and have a sticker applied. So
I think that's really, really nice. And I also like this belly band. And I understand you can have that in different textures in paper or in this vellum or...
And we guide our customers on that. So for this suite, it made sense with all the watercolour style illustrations to have what we call Tintoretto, European one, Italian, I believe, which is a very sort of watercolour style textured card. So it works well.
Beautiful. And the doggies, they are so cute. The doggies are there.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I'm sure she won't mind saying, no, actually, I better not. There's something we've discussed today. They're going to feature again on the day, but I won't go any further because I might really...
No, don't, you mustn't disclose it.
Definitely don't.
Can you leave it up on the screen, because I think we can run through the different elements, because we wanted to discuss also what can be done in a printed way and what can be done in an analog way. What I see here, so I guess the one with the belly band, the green belly band, that's the invitation in itself. But then below there to the left, I think that the envelope is even printed on.
So this is actually an RSVP postcard. We've grayed out for obviously security reasons the address. Normally you'd have the address,
of course. But then again, what is your experience now? For example, I mean, I know from my experience, and I mean, you know me, I'm very traditional. And we went for a registration on the website. So the RSVP was on the website and people could register there. We asked all the relevant questions, like if anybody had, well, yes, are you coming? Yes, no, how many person, and the name, of course. If they were not married, then you need, of course, the name of the partner if you don't know the partner. But we also asked things like the allergies, etc., so that we had it, you know, right away. And I programmed the website myself. I was really proud of it. In a way that,
well done.
In a way that all of that was fed directly into an Excel list. So I had, you know, just to print it out, and I saw who was coming, who didn't come, and then I also had any allergies or any special requests or whatever anybody needed to have. And what is your experience? I mean, I thought that it is really still very elegant. I mean, I can say from what we started, because I mean, really, I mean, I am conservative when it comes to those things. I pointed out my age. It's not going to surprise anybody. So we had like this monogram. We're going to address that later on the front page. So it's like this rather big card. And in the back, I think you can hardly see it. It's the address, but I don't want it to be seen anyhow. So, and then we had here in two languages, on one side English, on the other side German. We had the invitation with all the date and the venue, etc. Also, we formulated the solution that we made for the children to be excluded for the receptionist, that we said in English. We said adult reception to follow at, and in German it was, if I translate it literally, that following the ceremony, we ask all adults to the reception, because you cannot say adult reception in German, but it ends up meaning the same. But what we integrated is that, of course, we had the dress code. I personally find it extremely important to put a dress code. I don't know how it is in the UK, but here in Germany, there is how can I put it? Some people have heard that the black dress is always correct and always elegant from Chanel, and they forget that for a wedding, it's not correct. So I did definitely not want to have people in black at my wedding, but because for me, that's, you know, for the funeral. And so I said that I wanted colorful, I wanted joyful colors. Well, and I put it in there. For some people, they even called me, well, but I have a black dress. I said, well, that's not really joyful, is it?
Who saw this wedding?
So depending on where you live, I don't think it would happen in the UK. I think you are people know very well, and in France as well, nobody would have the idea to dare and come in black.
I mean, because obviously I've got a unique perspective, because I spent years photographing weddings as well, so I've seen many guests, and I do see black, but it's less. We do put dress code in on the information when requested. I don't think it's quite as common. I think it depends on the venue, really. If it's a more, how do I say, if it's a more expensive venue, maybe, I think you start to see the dress codes come in a bit more, because I think they kind of dictate it. Whereas if it's a relaxed countryside wedding, it's more to do with anything with common sense. So I've even had some kind of farm-based ones. We are in Cheshire here in the UK, just for those that don't know. Very rural, very farmland, and occasionally
a lot of sheep, a lot of cows.
All dairy around in Cheshire. But what's lovely in this area is you have big, classic British countryside weddings on the bride or the groom's parents' farms. Often it's quite a common thing around here.
Wow.
And obviously they go all out. They are huge guest lists. They can be up to 300 guests because they've got no restrictions with the amount of people going up there. It's all their land, and they definitely go on past 12 o'clock on those ones. I can vouch for that. They go on to the early hours because, again, there's no license issues.
No license, not like in the pub where you have to leave.
But with those, there might be more practicalities, like where well it is, even I've seen on there, which you wouldn't expect, or just be mindful that you've got to track through a field to get to the marquee. If it's a sort of classic city-based wedding, you might see things like black tie. So if it's a bit more of a modern approach, the couple might want black tie, which is where the groomsmen are in tuxedos. And those ones you might see kind of the more cocktail style dresses, maybe the little black dresses. Again, if we're kind of looking at the very classically, quintessentially British wedding, you often might see tails. So for the gentlemen to wear tails and the ladies to wear hats, that's very...
Let's go into that. Well, tails and hats don't go together. I must correct you. Hats is only during the day for the ladies, not in the evening. Let's maybe address that, because I'm very conservative when it comes to that. I have inherited that from my mom. So first of all, I saw a terrible comment lately. You could see it was, I don't know, it was Prince Harry and Prince William. They were at a wedding, and there was a picture taken, and it was commented by an American website, and it was said that they wore tuxedos. But of course, they were wearing morning coats, which is completely different than a tuxedo. So let's put it straight. What is what? Please.
Okay, so that's my knowledge here. So tuxedo to me would be a black bow tie, black jacket, white shirt. If you're really going all out, you might have a cummerbund, but that's definitely a more conservative.
Yeah, you can, but you don't have to. Yeah,
I think you see that less rarely. Whereas tails or morning coats are the jackets sort of down to about the waist, and then at the back you see the tails, as we call it.
Yeah, like the penguin.
Yes, exactly.
The penguin look.
Quite often they're combined as a three-piece, so the gentleman will wear a waistcoat, and they might even go so far as a cravat or maybe an Oxford tie, which are the bigger ties.
Well, the morning coat, maybe to make a differentiation between the morning coat and the tails. So the form of the morning coat and the tail is similar, but the morning coat would always be dark gray. And then you would wear a vest under it, as you say, but this vest is normally, it can have any color, but very often it's cream. Can be cream. There are different forms of vests. They can double buttons or single buttons. That's different. And as you say, you can have the Oxford tie or a normal tie, but it can have a very colorful tie.
Yes.
So there you're quite, that's very nice if you want to match, for example, the colors of the bouquet of your bride, or if you want to pick up the idea of the color palette, then the groom can do so. Even he can wear color, and of course also with the flowers he would wear on his collar. Yeah, exactly. So, and the matching trousers for the morning coat, they are striped. They are in different shades of gray, and they are striped.
Yeah.
Now the tails, and that's the earliest time, and that's really only for weddings when, for example, there is no break, and you say maybe you have the ceremony in church and it goes directly into the reception with no possibility of the guests changing in between. So if, let's say, mass or ceremony is at 4 and then it goes into the ceremony, into the reception right away, you can wear the tails in church already. Tails are black. The vest is always white, but it's not a full vest. It's kind of not really a vest in the back. And there's also a special shirt to be worn with it. When you get tails, you can rent them, but they also explain you how to put it on. And there you also have black trousers, and you have to have lacquer shoes. Now people might think, well, lacquer shoes for a man, a real man? No, well, that has to do with the fact that you're going to be dancing, and if you dance, you don't want to ruin the shoes of the lady, and the only way to go about this is to have those lacquer shoes. You say lacquer shoes, or what you call them?
Painted. patent leather,
right?
Yeah.
Patent leather. So excuse me. So I mean the shiny shoes. I mean the patent leather.
I
And
know,
this is just a
I
practical.
feel lacquer is a better description. The high shine on them. It does.
Yeah, the high shine on them. So this is a practical thought behind it. There's
I didn't know
always
that. So I found that very interesting to learn. I had no idea the difference.
And very, very important, let's maybe point out certain things. Ladies, you might have the nicest watch and with, I don't know, 100 diamonds on it. One does not wear a watch with a wedding dress. You leave your watch at home. So your husband, he has to tell you what time it is. Also the same with obviously your cell phone. I mean, on that day, don't carry your cell phone around with you. Even if you have pockets in your dress, it's not a good idea because some people might even try to reach you, because some people who are kind of, you know, in the organization of your wedding, they don't think about you being a bride and they just call you without thinking twice, and you don't need this kind of calls on that day. Definitely not.
Definitely.
And when
I do not have phones, but guests, I would say lady guests do, but you're right, absolutely, they need to be turned off during the ceremony.
Yeah, even leave them somewhere. You don't
silent, turn off.
Get rid of your phone on that day. And the other thing is for the man in the tails, never wear a wristwatch with tails. It's absolutely a no-go. You need a pocket watch.
Ah, right, okay.
Tails is with pocket watch, and I would also suggest that for the morning coat. No wristwatch. So that is when you want to be really correct. And if you want to be really, really traditional with the morning coat, then of course you can have a top hat.
Yeah, that I've not seen. I will say that I've not seen. And actually I do see it's less worn, I feel, morning coats.
Because it's so warm and you don't know where to put it, of course.
And it's great consideration, and something that often I feel couples can forget. If you're getting married on an August bank holiday weekend, I mean, I say this, it's the UK, so the likelihood it will probably rain, but let's assume it's going to be the lovely weather and really hot. Actually, you can't wear that sort of amount of outfit without feeling very hot and very uncomfortable. So we have seen more of a move, I would say, in recent years towards those more lighter weight, more modern approaches to suits. I can speak on behalf of my husband. He wore his morning attire. He wouldn't wear that now. He always says he regrets it, because for him it doesn't feel natural seeing that, and he wouldn't wear that now because, of course, there are trends, let's face it. But what I do,
my husband, he wore the morning coat, and he even had a cylinder, but only for the pictures. In fact, he never put it really on. He even had the gloves for the pictures, so that the matching gloves, but of course he didn't wear them. We had 40 degrees Celsius. That's really hot. And I never know what it is in Fahrenheit. I will put it down in the description box below. And for the tails, obviously, if there's no time to change, 4 p.m. is okay to have already the tails on in church, but normally the tails are for later on. Let's say something around 8 o'clock-ish. And that's also the length of the dresses also goes with the attire of the man. Meaning that if for a morning coat, to match your partner in a morning coat, you're never going to wear a long dress. That's not really the case. It's rather a short dress. And for the tails, if it says tails, which is white tie, of course, then that means also a long dress normally. And the hats for the ladies, that's just with the short dress, never with a long dress. So these are things that if you don't know, it doesn't matter. But we are living in times you can look it up. And depending on where you, even if you're not the bride or the groom watching this video, but you're a guest to a wedding and you want to make sure that you don't make a mistake. I mean, even if you put it down, that's why I'm saying in the invitations, it's always good to put down the dress code. And even though you put it down, people will dress in the wrong way. I had it. Mm-hmm. We had said white tie and people came in smoking.
I would
Tuxedo.
say, and it's great, you're right, we can't, I don't think people realise necessarily there is etiquette. So I think if ladies think we're wearing a hat and they're not familiar with these kind of faux pas, they will just think, I'm going to pick a nice hat. They won't realise actually there's around when they can wear.
But you know, I mean, if where you're invited to, if people are not paying attention to that and you like it, well then do it. There's no really, I mean, there's the right and wrong comes with your own security. And if you say, well, but I want to wear this fascinator, or I want to wear this, and then that's up to you. But if you don't want to feel awkward, or let's say you're invited to a wedding where people are very conservative and very aware of this kind of things, you don't want to stick out as somebody who doesn't know. So depending on where you're going, just be aware. And as long as you are aware of things, then you can handle with being in that awareness your decisions, and can also defend them.
I think.
But what is bad is not to know, and not knowing what you, if you're between brackets in the wrong, and not knowing it and then feeling awkward, that's a pity, because you will not feel at ease even as a guest.
Be comfortable. And I think
it's about being comfortable, right?
Yeah, and enjoying yourself as the bride and groom want you to do. And I think there's two major faux pas that I think are absolutely unforgivable. And one is, if you've been asked to do a dress code and you don't, then, like you say, you're going to feel uncomfortable. If you've been asked to wear morning coats and you decide against it, you're going to be the one that isn't, and you'll stand out like a sore thumb. And I think we have to mention, while we're on dress code, the absolute number one golden rule: do not wear white.
Yeah, please. I have been on a wedding. And
always one. Don't do it.
There was a girl, she wore a dress that was, I mean, from far away, it looked white. I mean, when she was close up, it was a bit ivoryish, but even ivory is reserved to the bride. I'm really sorry. And if you're not sure, because I had this question, I saw it on, I think it was Lydia Lee's Millen, and she had a beautiful summer dress that she just bought on one of the videos, and it was imprinted. The background was white, and it was imprinted, I think it was blue, dark blue flowers all over. And she was like, I would wear it to a wedding. Well, but why? But there's white. Please tell me in the comments whether I can wear it. So I'm going to tell you by what you have to go. She can definitely wear a dress like that to such a wedding. By what rule do we go? The thing is, nobody should mistake you, or maybe mistake you, or even have the slightest doubt that you might be the bride and not the real bride. The only exception being, and I have been to a wedding like that, is if she is on a dress code and she said, I'm going to be the lady in red, and she's going to tell you that. And then she's asking everybody else to come in white. I was on such a wedding, beautiful. Then, of course, you're not going to be mistaken for the bride, because she is in red. So she's sticking out of all those white people. But otherwise, a no-go. I think that's the absolute no-go, and taking away from the bride, you should be hit in the face if you do that.
Yes, which also goes for announcements that aren't appropriate for on someone else's big day.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like announcing that you're pregnant on the day of the wedding of somebody else.
Yeah, which has come out also in the news recently.
Yes. That's an absolute no-go.
No-go, definite no-go. So yeah, dress code's definitely something we see. I know whether we were kind of getting into the dress code and etiquette tangent, we were initially discussing paper and printing process. Do you want me to go back to kind of the next what we might consider?
Maybe we can go to, because I think that's the first question that probably comes up when it comes to the decision, do I do it in print or analog? What about the save the date cards? What do you recommend?
Obviously, you're talking about what we would recommend. Now, we have to be careful when it comes to recommendations, because we have to be aware of an individuality of a couple and their budget and what they place importance on. So our ideal, and classically, you would send out a save the date card. And I think something that is important to remember, if your budgets can allow, is that the act of a wedding is such a momentous occasion. You want your guests to feel the weight of it. You want them to feel the weight of the importance of the occasion, and often the first instance and introduction to that is when your wedding stationery is landing through the letterbox on their mat. They are understanding, when they're looking at your beautiful stationery amongst all of those bills and all those horrible things we get through the letterbox that we're not interested in, that this is an important piece of post and it's an exciting one.
I think that is so nicely put, because nowadays, I mean, let's be honest, what do we find in our snail mail, in the letterbox? I mean, we find bills, invoices, some pizza delivery service droppings. So it's so terrible. And I think nowadays when you get, I mean, I wrote it in handwritten, and some people give it even to calligraphers. And when you get such a nice thing, isn't it the first envelope that you're taking, you're picking it out the stack, and you're opening it, and you're so curious to see, well, who's telling me what? And it's, I think even nowadays, because I mean, I'm born in '69, so I remember, normal letters and receiving normal letters. So it wouldn't have, but it wouldn't have stuck out that much. But nowadays, when you get something like that, or even a postcard nowadays, you go like, wow, it has become something really, really special. Yeah. And I love to receive things like that. Yeah, I do. And I think there's a greater, and it's so good for your profession, because there's such a great appreciation for it. And even, I mean, I went as far as going to the post office and selecting very nice stamps, not to have any, obviously not the printed one from the office whistles, but, really nice stamps. Yeah, and that's I had even in America. Actually, they do a lot with vintage stamps, and they're really blowing the budgets on their actual stationery. It's not as common in the UK. It's hard to kind of track down. But I remember, your customer Josie, for the fashion Mandler, she in one of her last videos, I follow her, and she in one of her last videos, she was talking stamps. I don't know for what, and she was kind of asking the questions to her international viewers. What do we have on our stamps? Because obviously we don't have the Queen. I mean, we don't have a Queen. Actually, I haven't really thought that. What do you have? And she was completely at a loss, asking herself what we would have on our stamps. Yeah. And then I said, well, anything from flowers, historical persons, Goethe, any writer, poets, scientists. I mean, there are beautiful, beautiful stamps out there. And I mean, of course, in America, we know the eagle and flags, and and there are many, many beautiful, beautiful stamps out there. Limited edition sets when they come out, but they're not really very practical to track down. You're kind of going to blow the budget trying to get hold of those. So most couples in the UK will go for your classic first class, second class if they're saving on the funds, shall we say. But the Queen is always first. It's the Queen in profile. But the Queen, excuse me, the Queen in profile, Her Majesty is always first class, right? I mean, that's what I would say. I mean, I have such a respect for her. I really, really, I must say, she is quite a lady, I must say. No, but what I wanted to say is, maybe, I know it from Germany, I don't know for the other countries, but if you really want to have nice stamps, you might want to order them ahead of time in your post office, because if you need quite a lot of them, they don't necessarily have them. That's the issue, and that's why I think it's not so common in the UK. If you go to your German, and this is what you do in the UK, you either would drop it straight in a post box, and you can buy stamps from places like local corner shops, supermarkets, and if you're going to ask for stamps there, you're only going to get given the standard one. So if you do want to have anything more decorative, you're going to have to hope and sort of plan that the right type is out at that point, and you would have to order in advance. So it's very rare that happens in the UK, but it's lovely, and I'm always jealous of the Americans that they literally dig through vintage stamps and stuff. So that's really cool. Always adds another layer. It's something special. I do think, if you are being budget conscious and save the date printed is becoming expensive for you, then I would absolutely encourage you to spend more money on your main invitation suite. Absolutely. So you've got to make a compromise, and a save the date being a digital version would be preferable to compromising on maybe the invitation suite itself. That's where you really want to spend your budget. So maybe we can then continue. So we were tackling the digital printing, and then you said the cardboard and rather heavy paper. Yeah. And then what would be the next leveling up when it comes to paper and printing techniques? So you can still digital print on more expensive paper types. This is what you call handmade paper. So this is still digitally printed, but you can see we've upped our game with the paper itself. And another example of that is this one here. So looking at this one here, this is a lovely brand that is very popular in the UK, especially with designers and creative folk, GF Smith. So you can pick your coloured papers. Again, the heavyweight, you definitely are going to feel much more weight coming through on this one. I think you can probably sense the thickness of it. But what I will say, although you can digitally print it, you're far more limited. We wouldn't really print much more than that
on handmade paper, and you will be limited in what studios can offer that. We actually do that ourselves in-house, because professional printers that might do our digital printing for speed and ease and therefore budget will not touch that. We have to feed it through one by one. So although you can see print it.
Sorry to interrupt you. So that would be the handmade paper. I think that's really the you cannot go any further when it comes to paper. The next level down would be what kind of paper?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. There is another one I'd actually say that goes above that, and I do have an example of it here. It's hard to kind of get across maybe on a photo, but I'll do my best. So this here is letterpressed card, and it was on, again, GF Smith, so colour plan. So that means the bride has selected a colour card that she likes, but what this becomes is very thick because it's actually duplexed. So if we were to say that our digital printing probably sits at what we call in the UK 300 GSM, that's the weight of the paper, but therefore the thickness. To give you a context, in the UK, your standard printer paper that you have at home is probably around 70 to 90 GSM. So you're 3 times in the thickness of that to get to kind of your digitally printed card that we would do as standard. Your handmade paper is probably sitting around 400, 450. It's not official because it's made by hand, so it's so uneven, and that's part of its beauty. What we are taking here to get the thickness of board that can kind of take those impressions and create the most luxurious finish is duplex. So they're actually taking, say, 300 GSM sheets of card, and they are sandwiching it together and trimming it. So you as a guest, the end user, has no idea there's actually 3 pieces of card sandwiched together to get that thickness. So it becomes really thick like board, and that for me is what I would say would be the most luxurious. One we looked at before here, I think you can probably get a sense of it actually. If we look at this top one, the weight of it, the heaviness of it is very thick, so much heavier than that one, which is 300 GSM. So that one there is like 3 of those stuck together. So that for me is the absolute top sort of league,
top notch.
Yeah, but actually I say that then you can get into not even paper. So I've literally just finalized on a save the date that's being printed on clear acrylic, so you don't have to actually limit yourself to paper. And I do have an example of one of those, not a save the date, that's actually acrylic layered up, where it's etched on. So actually you can get into material choices that aren't even paper anyway. Here's an example of it as a menu.
Wow.
So that there is completely different because it's so thick, and I've seen it on leather, I've seen it on acrylic that's nestled in boxes. So yeah, you can get more creative the bigger the budget you've got and the more you want to spend. That's digitally printed. We've got a bit of a foil effect on, but that basically is your thinner card. You can see it from the side there, so that's quite a nice sort of demonstration. You then go up a notch to the handmade paper. That's the thickness, and again you can start to see the weight of that. And then your top league is where you're actually sandwiching together card to create that uber thick cardstock that feels like board, feels solid. Struggle to cut it with a pair of scissors. It's that kind of thing that you look at.
Well, and then you have, of course, I always don't know how to pronounce it, the one with the when you have this edge,
the deckled edging. Yeah. So I think you've got an example on your screen there, have you, as well? Yeah.
Well, I have only the one in front of the camera. So that is also what we call in German Büttenpapier. So it looks, it's really, really elegant. And that's a very traditional way of doing it. And so in this case, I'm putting up a thank you card that was sent out later on. So there you have a thank you note, and then it's plain on one side so that you can really actually thank for the very specific present that you got from that very person, to make it very personal. I think this time should be taken. But some things that, so we are talking save the date, we are talking the invitation, we are talking anything that you need for the menu, we said that, and of course then the RSVP card, whether you need it or not, or whether you do it over the website. And something that we also need is the service order, right? The order of service for the church or for the ceremony, wherever it's held, so that people can follow. I guess you also do these kind of things, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And there's some examples of what we call on-the-day stationery. Usually we're matching it in. So there you go. We were looking at them before. These are personalised menus. Oh, hang on, my screen's gone way off here. Personalised menus. These actually act as a guest place card and menu combined. So they're really nice. Obviously, they've been elevated with the paper choices and wax seals, but they're performing a job. And you can be really modern with those. You know, these are again versions of it. It's a menu, and they're actually clipped on, but very modern in its approach. And you also would consider a table plan. So that's the kind of table plan that went with that design, for example. So again, quite a modern approach, but styled up. And you can see in the background why we've gone for that look. It goes with what's
absolutely matching, perfect match with the flowers and everything. I mean, that's what I pointed out in my last video. What to focus on is, I mean, there are really some things that you can leave aside, but natural flowers will always be such a plus. And if you don't have natural flowers, I mean, people notice it and it's always terrible. So I think flowers do such a tremendous job. And nowadays the florists, they are so creative, or even if you don't have the money for florist and you do the do-it-yourself version, there are so many tips and tricks to follow on YouTube. I think it can look so nice. Look at this. Isn't that a beautiful, beautiful setting? Wow.
If you're looking at a table plan like say we've got here, and there's, you know, they're all very different in terms of their styling, but there's a function, and actually that's got deckled edges. We were talking about deckled edges a little moment ago. Deckled edges in a way kind of gets that look and feel of handmade paper without maybe the expenditure, and it's about taking the digital printing but just giving it a little rustic edge which just elevates it a little bit. So if we're looking here at a table plan, it's fulfilling a function, and it's there as a practicality. So yes, it's etiquette, but actually you're asking your guests to seat in certain places because you have thought through who's going to get on well. You're taking out of the equation again those wedding family politics we mentioned before. You know, if there are parents or couples that have separated and there's new potential spouses involved, it wouldn't be necessarily appropriate given the circumstances to put them next to each other. So taking kind of control of that as a couple means that you know your wedding breakfast is going to run seamlessly, and that's where table plans kind of come in. The knock-on effect, of course, if you're going to have a table plan and tell people where to sit, you therefore need to specify which table's which and whereabouts on the table they're sat. Otherwise, of course, they're not going to know. And that's when you get into things like here, if I move it across, the table number. I mean, this setting again, really beautiful, really elaborate. Let me try and move it so you can see the whole thing there. So very much a winter and intimate one this here, so lots of candlelight and things. You can see there the little pumpkins, but it was actually around October. But the guest has seen they're on table 8. They now know table 8's there, and you can just get a little smidge in there, and I'll get you the better picture in a moment. In fact, I've got it here, let me find it. They know where they're sat on that table that we just looked at because their names sat there waiting. So you've allowed them to see where they're seated.
Yeah, well, you have to go by your country and by your culture and by your guests. There is no rule of thumb really, because we cannot obviously, being on YouTube, decide for the entire world what's right and what's wrong, because I mean, there's so much diversity out there, lucky enough. Everybody has to find out.
Start playing ball, sorry. Just a quick little sample there actually of an order of service as well that you can see that we did.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely. But then maybe also for the bridal couples out there, don't underestimate the work that goes also into the order of service, because you need to sort out all the psalms, all the texts, all the songs. Even if you are going to church regularly, there are still so many songs and texts out there to choose from, especially if you don't want to do the standard texts that everybody has, then this takes time. But lucky enough, there is the internet. But you have obviously to agree upon the text between the two of you. And yeah, also the songs, etc. I mean, one hint that I can give in the organization when it comes to weddings is that something that will make a really, really great difference, I personally think, are good musicians. And compared to other costs that you might have, they are relatively, I'm not saying that they are cheap, but they are relatively cheap to what they can do for your wedding. Yes. Don't forget that, because often we tend then to think, oh, but in my family, she sings in a choir, so then maybe she can sing the Ave Maria. Well, a girl that sings in the choir, is not necessarily the right person to sing an Ave Maria solo. And test them before, because once you have asked them to do so, you cannot disinvite them. That would not be appropriate to do so.
A lot of pressure for a guest if you are asking them to do something.
Exactly.
They are happy to do it and not just sort of being polite, because when you're faced with a congregation looking at you, it's going to be
so think about that. It's also a question of perception, and I must say, I mean, I lucky enough I had the contacts, and I know the musicians of the church where we got married, and I know their level. I mean, they are teaching at the conservatorium in Vienna, and it was a high level, and I thought that we would have to pay much more than we did. And we just had the organist, a trumpetist. You say trumpetist in English, right?
Ooh, trumpeter maybe.
And with those two instruments, golden.
Yeah.
And you just need people who know how to play their instrument, and that was not expensive. But to go back to the order of service, takes time to prepare, more than you think. And also what is really, really hard is the seating, the table setting, because that is so sensitive. It can be so sensitive, and you will have changes up until the very end.
Last minute changes.
Yeah, we had people who had problems arriving, or somebody had even an accident. Lucky enough, nothing happened. But then you have to be quick and make changes until the very last day, the morning of your marriage. So this take enough time for that, because it's underestimated.
Yeah, and as a stationer, that's one of the things we recommend. With a table plan, we'll get the design done in advance, but we'll hold off until the most appropriate last minute moment where we can go to print for that reason.
And one last point that the two of us have discussed before, and I think that was a very important point that you made. Well, of course, we have the thank you cards, and very often with the thank you card, there is a picture of the couple being sent out, a printed picture, and I think that's a very, very nice gesture. But of course, there are more pictures nowadays, and we are all used to having pictures. And also what is very nice for the couple is that everybody's taking pictures, and it's nice not only to have the official pictures from the photographer, but from any guest who has just made nice pictures or videos during the evening or during the day. So you had a very good recommendation for the youngsters out there. It's probably a given, but for the not so young ones like me, it's not a given.
Yeah, so what I've mentioned to Joanna, just for everyone watching, is I believe couples and guests in the UK would view it is by using hashtags on social media. So social media is where you're going to see those photos and reminisce and enjoy looking back over the memories. So to kind of formalize that and capitalize and take advantage of what is out there for us all, I see more and more couples actually creating their own hashtags, and through various signage and maybe little notes at the back of the order of service, that kind of thing, letting their guests know that if they were to share any pictures using that hashtag, it would be great because everyone can access it after. So it could be as simple as Mr. and Mrs. Green 2021, obviously reflecting the couple. But I did say I do love what I see coming through. They're very clever with it normally. There's normally some clever spin on a saying, and I'm trying to remember what the example was that I tried to conjure up out of midair. I think let's for example say it's Mr. and Mrs. Cello. You can see where I'm going with this one. They would have hashtag you had me at cello, because I'm reflecting the quote. So you can really have fun with it. And what I do tend to see, and again, this is that experience being on the other side of the coin, actually attending weddings as a photographer for so many years, most couples don't necessarily want you to share pictures before they get a chance to share their first one of their choice. So if you are taking that stance, make sure your guests know, whether it's through signage or a little polite note at the end of the order of service, or by speaking to your master of ceremonies or vicar or registrar, whoever's conducting the ceremony, just to let them know. But by giving them that hashtag, that when they do share it, when the next day it usually is, give them 24 hours, you've got such a wonderful thing when you're at the airport waiting to go on your honeymoon, that you type in your hashtag and the whole lot comes up.
Well, that's beautiful.
Really
I mean, we didn't send out pictures because we then had the link to the pictures of the photographer, and obviously we had a lot of our content because it was a destination wedding. And I would recommend, if you have a destination wedding, there's so much information that you need to communicate to people who have never been there, that you cannot fit it into the invitation. I mean, you could, but it would be a parcel and doesn't look nice. And then I would recommend that you really go for a website, and that you put all the accommodation and all the other how to get where and so on. all this information on your website, and it can be done so beautifully. And I'm sure you also offer the service to design the websites, right?
We do. So we design websites for all our business clients when we're doing the design studio, like Joanna was saying, we're working with Joanna at the moment. We offer that service. So I have done wedding websites for, but I am literally sort of starting to formalize that, because I have seen, no doubt because of the pandemic, but more of a move towards digital RSVPing and options that allow that. So one thing I want to do is to help those couples out that are more budget conscious, still want something beautiful, to have a matching website design that has all that digital functionality that is great and helpful and useful, but actually we'll get a corresponding card, so you still get that beautiful thing that lands in the post, but you also get all the functionality of the website. So that is definitely in the works, and we're a bit unusual that we can offer that, really. Obviously stations tend to work more in print format. As a studio, we can do both, so we're going to capitalize on that and take advantage of it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's also good because especially if people or many guests don't know the way around where the wedding is held, and they need to go from from their home to, or for where they are staying, to the church or wherever the ceremony is, and then they need to go from the ceremony to the venue, and etc., etc. And of course, with Google Maps, then they don't need to have somebody, showing them the way and so on, and all those links. And or it's in a city and they can take the tram or the subway or whatever, and all this information you can put it down in links in websites. And I think that's such a nice, elegant way, because then people obviously put it on their phone and they are independent, and that is so nice nowadays. And I am for tradition, I'm for elegance, but it's also about making your guests feel at ease and secure, and that's going to make them feel well, and that's what matters, right? It's that they have a perfect day as your guests, and that they will remember the wedding as being one of the nicest they have ever been to.
And don't forget, your guests make your atmosphere. So if your guests are fed, watered, happy, having the time of their lives, you will too as a couple, because you're going to absorb that. You're going to see it all happening. You're going to feel proud. You're going to soak it all up. Whereas if guests are uncomfortable, tired, grumpy, it's going to come across. So it is, like you've pointed out numerous times, Joanna, really important to remember your guests as well.
Yeah, that's when you do preparations, that's also a trick, and I'm going to bring out a book about that. Is when you do the preparations, in order to make sure that your wedding is a success, learn to put yourself in the perspective of all the different people that play different roles. Obviously, you are the couple, your perspective of the day is very unique and completely different from somebody attending the wedding. Now, also, there are also different types of guests. There are the regular guests who just will go, to the church or to the ceremony, wherever it is, and then to the venue, etc. But then you have guests who play a certain role, or then you also have the priest or whomever is holding the ceremony. These people need other information again. People playing music, be it a DJ, a band, or whatever, they also have other needs of information. So try to categorize all those participants, let's put it that way, and put yourself in their shoes, and what information would you need if you had to play their role. Because, for example, also a musician will ask him or herself, what is the dress code? Otherwise they come in jeans. Do you want that? These are things you didn't think about it because they didn't get the invitation, probably because you communicate by email, etc. But they need to know what style of wedding are they going to be at as well. So don't forget that there are little things, but if you learn to change perspective and to imagine, if you were this person, what do you need to do from the morning on, or even before, technical things that they need to know, etc., etc., then you cannot make a mistake, because checklists can only go so and so far. They cannot cover any concept that you might have. I think it's really the capacity of putting yourself in the shoes of a person who has to play a certain role on that special day. And if you do that well, then your day is going to be successful and especially relaxed, because one thing that you cannot be, or let's say you can only be one thing on your wedding, it's the bride or the groom, and that's already a full role. You can on that day not be anything else and say, well, I'm going to do that then, and then I'm going to organize that. You're not able to do that.
Run through the day, it needs to be all done.
It's done. And I even refused. There was a lady from the venue, she said, well, if I have a question, then I would come to see you. I was like, nope, No, you don't come and see me. There's a girl, she's my master of ceremony. You go to see her. She knows exactly what I want. I'm not there for you. I'm sorry, I'm not.
The time
And that was good.
all the hard planning.
Yeah. No, but that's important to know. I think it's really, really important. And one other aspect is that you have your friends or family, they want to surprise you with songs or some videos or games or whatever they have prepared. They need to have a person to turn to. In general, it's a master of ceremony. And brief your master of ceremony what you want and what you definitely don't want, because I'm sure you have certain games that you maybe don't want. And also at what point in time they can happen, or when they should be scheduled. Surely not before your main course, because you don't want that all your guests eat cold. So an ideal situation would be sometime before dessert, if that is convenient, or if you don't want that, even later.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like you say, they know they can't ask you, it's a surprise, but they need to know who. So I
There's
think
some surprises you don't want.
bridesmaids and go from there, don't they, to figure out who's who.
No, but so if you have any questions out there, then write them down in the comments and we will get back to them. If what we shared here was helpful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment down below. Thank you.
Thanks.